Let me ask you a very simple question. What is the biggest mistake you have ever made in your life? Now, you don't have to say it out loud, but think back to the time when you looked at what you did and said, I can't believe I did something so stupid. Well, chances are some of you have made some huge mistakes in the past, but I'm willing to bet that none of you have made them on a fairly large boat. Whether it's a cruise ship, a yacht, a barge, or something in between, there are some captains who have made gigantic mistakes that resulted in boat collisions with things that should never have happened. With that in mind, here are the 20 biggest boat crashes and mistakes caught on camera. And if you feel that same spark of intrigue and passion to unearth more hidden truths, don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel. It's free and will take you on endless, fascinating adventures that will transform your perception of the world. Let's get started. Number 20. The idle yacht. Now, if you are rich enough to own a yacht, you definitely think that you need to take it out on the water as much as you can to show it off to your friends and family and all the people you know who don't own a yacht. Let's be honest here. Rich people like it when less fortunate people are envious of them. However, just because you are impatient doesn't mean you can break the laws of physics and nature, like with this super yacht named Idle. In 2022, it was undergoing some repairs in Italy, which is standard for yachts like this over time. Naturally, after finishing the repairs, the captain wanted to take it out on the water through a canal. The only problem was that there was a bridge that he had to keep an eye on. The good news is that if he had waited for low tide, he would have been able to go under it without any problems, but the bad news is that the rich fool wasn't patient and tried to go under the bridge at high tide, and the top of his yacht crashed. Now, for the record, this was a $35 million yacht that he had just damaged after paying for repairs, and now he has to foot the bill for the repairs. Behold the power of karma. The sadder news is that because of where the video ends, no one can know how damaged it is, but I'm willing to bet that the cost of the boat just went up by at least a couple $100,000. What's the lesson to be learned here? You should just be patient and wait for things to fall into place. The real lesson, though, is that when you get impatient, bad things can and do happen. And if it happens to a rich person with a yacht like this guy, he's going to get a lot of flack from everyone who sees the clip. Number 19. Vita Spirit. Something I want to make clear here is that not every crash that happens is due to operator error. Sure, the funniest ones are like the yacht crash I showed you earlier, but sometimes the boat just doesn't want to operate the way the captain tells it to. Things can get a little hairy. One example of this happened in Istanbul, where there was a historic mansion right on the shore of a canal that had boats passing through it all the time. In 2008, one known as the Vita Spirit had a bit of a problem. Specifically, one of the rudders that helped guide the boat got stuck. Now, when you don't have a rudder to help you turn the boat, you tend to go in only one direction. The good news is that no one was on the mansion itself, so no one was hurt in the crash. The bad news is that the mansion was severely damaged. That's what happens when a large supply ship crashes into a mansion that isn't made of super tough material. The mansion once belonged to a doctor who had served in the Ottoman palace and dated back to the 18th century, so you can imagine some people were pretty upset when it all went down thanks to that ship. Over 50,000 vessels, including tankers carrying highly flammable oil, pass through that canal every year. So that should highlight a few key elements of these vessels. The biggest of which is that one big thing happening on the ship will likely lead to bad things on land. Also, you should always be aware of where certain historical monuments are located, just in case a ship happens to crash into them. And for the record, it is totally possible to move a mansion, so don't give me that excuse. Number 18. Towards infinity and beyond. Imagine this scenario, if you would be so kind. You're on a cruise, everything has been going well for you and the people you're with. However, like all good things, it must come to an end, and for the people on board the Infinity cruise ship, the only thing left to do was watch and wait until the ship was brought to the dock to dock. This happened in Alaska, where a lot of cruises take place, and thanks to some of the staff at the dock, we were able to see these amazing images that almost seemed fake until you see how things get destroyed. The ship has to make a precise landing at the dock to make sure everyone can get off, and so that it doesn't get swept away by the water over time. The problem is that there was a massive gust of wind at the time, and it apparently helped push the ship, which wasn't going that fast due to trying to land safely at the dock, into crashing into the dock. And when I say crashing, I mean things went flying through the air. You can even hear people filming this telling others to prepare for what's about to happen, and then you slowly see the metal walkways of the dock get torn apart as the ship crashes into them. You can even see the marks on the ship as it begins to go through everything. Now, I recognize that it may seem wrong that something like wind can affect a ship in this way, but you're thinking about it too linearly. Wind doesn't just affect the cruise ship, but the water it's in as well, and no matter how big the ship is, if it's in the water, it can be pushed and pulled depending on the weather conditions and the speed it's going. Thankfully, the Coast Guard later confirmed that the damage caused no injuries. Number 17. Boat versus dock. If you want to see another one of those types of ship accidents, luckily I have something for you to watch and enjoy, and also to horrify you a little bit. The ship this time is the MSC Opera, which was starting to head towards a dock when the worst happened. It had a mechanical problem. Sometimes time can play tricks on you, but the good news is that the captain quickly realized that the ship was about to go out of control, and that's when he started sounding the ship's horn to let people know something was wrong and get out of the way. Sure enough, people did exactly that. The bad news is that because of its position and the fact that it couldn't stop, it not only rammed into the dock, but it obviously damaged the ship as well. And there was a riverboat that was already part of that dock, and this massive thing just rammed into it as well. Honestly, the footage perfectly captures the horrifying moments of the event. The ship is almost like a monster that refuses to stop and results in a lot of damage. One of the ironies of the crash in Italy was that it happened at a time when people were criticizing the cruise industry because it was causing Venice to be overcrowded with tourists, and then this happened. So yeah, ultimately it didn't change hearts and minds. Number 16. Cruise ship versus bridge. Being the captain of a vessel isn't all that easy, especially when things can go wrong at a moment's notice, and not necessarily because of you in the slightest. However, that doesn't mean things can't go wrong because of you, as one cruise ship captain from China would find out the hard way. This captain was piloting a brand new cruise ship that cost over $28 million to manufacture and crashed into a bridge. Luckily, the bridge itself wasn't badly damaged, but several parts of the ship, including its smokestack, were knocked off in the collision. So how could the captain screw up in such a ridiculously epic way? Well, for multiple reasons actually. The first reason, much like the yacht owner mentioned above, was that the captain didn't account for the tides, allowing the cruise ship to sail much higher than it would at low tide. Another key reason for the crash was that there was no one on board outside of the necessary crew, nor was there any cargo. Why does that matter? The more weight you have on a boat, no matter how big it is, the more it helps to sink it into the water just a little bit more. Without any extra weight, the boat was sailing pretty high, and the tide helped to lift it up even more. So yes, this time it was the captain who damaged the boat, and I'm sure he got a good telling off for it. Number 15. Cruise ship collision. What would be the worst-case scenario for a ship collision? Well, it would simply be two ships colliding with each other for one reason or another. No need to complicate the explanation, right? In Mexico in 2019, the Carnival Cruise Line had one of the worst-case scenarios, albeit on a smaller scale, thankfully. Specifically, the ship called the Carnival Glory was trying to dock and was attempting to maneuver between a couple of other ships to do so, which included the Carnival Legend. The Legend was already docked, so it couldn't avoid anything if it got too close. But here's a hint. The Carnival Glory got too close. At first, the footage makes you think it could just get through, but instead, the back of the Glory hit the front of the Legend, and you can see the damage from there. Seeing the back of the ship pierced and mangled is almost surreal given the speed it's going, but it really did happen. There were some minor injuries, but the crew and passengers generally ended up okay. Passengers even pointed out that they honestly didn't feel the crash very much. Still, this could have easily been avoided if the ships hadn't been so close to each other. Number 14. Deviating from your course. For the MSC Harmonia, it was supposed to be a simple docking at a pier. They were in Honduras and in the middle of a cruise session, and everything was going well until it wasn't. As you probably guessed, it was about to go straight to the dock it was supposed to dock at, but that's also why the ship hit the dock. That's what's interesting. Specifically, apparently the captain didn't slow the ship down. Not really. Instead of slowing down and gently stopping so people could disembark, the captain just kept going and went straight to the dock, damaging it and the ship. You can hear people trying to get others out of the way in case something else goes wrong. Notably, some of the Harmonia crew tried to slow the ship down by dropping anchor, but by that point it was too little, too late. Next time, just slow the ship down. Number 13. Panic on the ship. A previous post featured some pretty calm passengers considering they almost had a serious situation, but this time we have some cruise ship passengers who were within sight of a crash that was about to happen, and all they could do was scream and yell at everything that was happening in front of them. This time, the cruise ship was the Royal Caribbean, with their ship Harmony of the Seas. There was no harmony on the ship that day when the crash happened. The video in question comes from a passenger who was right on top of the ship, and everyone there could tell that they were getting seriously close to the dock in question and started yelling at everyone to hold on in case things got a little rough. And they were right to be scared. That ship crashed straight into the dock and then started moving to the right, where people panicked again because they thought they were going to hit another area. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But you can sympathize with the woman who screamed, "Who the hell is driving this ship?" That's a question I'm sure a lot of people want answered to. And maybe you noticed the forklift doing 360-degree turns on the dock while it was all happening. He was just oblivious to the situation, or maybe he didn't care that he was going to die from a cruise ship. Number 12. Ship versus crane. What happens when an irresistible force meets an immovable object? Well, in this case, a lot of damage can occur. The ship in this case is the Milano Bridge, which was actually being guided into the dock by some tugboats, but for some reason the ship was going too fast and tried to adjust at the last moment by turning away from the dock. But nothing was going to stop the impending destruction. Instead, it rammed straight into the nearest crane, causing it to collapse in epic fashion. That crane fell on the ship, and then the ship just kept going. According to other reports, the ship then crashed into another dock. Despite all the damage shown, no one died, but one person inside the crane suffered a broken ankle. Now seriously, what the hell happened here? That's a massive ship to be going that fast into a dock, especially when there are large metallic objects you can crash into instead. Number 11. Cargo ship collision. Remember what I said earlier about the worst-case scenario? Well, here's another example of that, but with an added twist. This took place in a port in Pakistan, where a ship was coming into dock, and it came in a little too fast and then hit another ship that was already parked there. As you can see, when the collision happened, some of the cargo containers that were on the moving ship fell into the water. So not only are you damaging two ships, you're losing some of the cargo they were transporting, and that's not exactly great. At least 21 shipping containers fell into the sea, which contained cars and other cargo, so there was some pretty expensive stuff falling into the water. The collision was so bad that they had to close the port just so they could see the extent of the damage and then try to figure out what had happened. Well, we all know what happened. Two ships collided with each other, but of course they probably wanted to know why, and that's fair enough. It just goes to show that something like this can happen anywhere and everywhere, so you really have to be a good captain to make sure it never happens to you. Number 10. The MV Moretta. Now we go to Colombia, where we have another case of a boat deciding it wants to get really up close and personal with a dock. At first you can see it is going to hit it just by the angle. It looks like it is heading straight for the person with the camera, and then it turns, but not significantly. And that is when all the carnage begins. The port side of the boat was damaged due to hitting the dock, along with the port anchor being torn off. Again, being a boat captain is not the easiest thing in the world, but you would think they would have had enough training to know how to not scrape the side of a dock and cause a massive amount of damage to the boat. Number 9. Ship versus. Crane stop me if this sounds familiar. A ship was entering the dock and hit a crane, causing it to basically fall apart without any effort. Oh, you were yelling, "Stop! I didn't hear you." In Shanghai, China, that's exactly what happened, and unlike the last ship that did this, which was more about speed than anything else, no one honestly knows how the ship's operator couldn't realize that he was heading straight for a crane platform. The ship went straight for the thing, and no matter what he did, that crane was going to fall and fall hard. In fact, not only was the crane damaged, the whole thing sank into the depths. I now have a feeling that there was a serious investigation into that captain afterwards. Number 8. Fire on ship's crane. I'm really starting to enjoy these videos of ships crashing into cranes for no reason at all, just so we can see the aftermath of what happens. This time, it was a ferry trying to get to a port in Barcelona, and due to bad weather conditions it had to take a detour, which then led it to a spot where it couldn't really dock. You know, the spot with the crane. So yeah, the ship couldn't really do anything but crash into that crane, which then caused the crane to tip over and hit the ground really hard, and then a fire broke out. Thankfully, no one was hurt, no chemicals or hazardous materials were spilled into the water, and the fire was quickly brought under control. Still, it's crazy to think about how this domino effect happened, and how much worse it could have been if there had been people around. Number 7. Boat against 2 cranes. Here we have another incident that took place in China, but with an added twist. You see, the ship in question was getting dangerously close to some cranes that were nearby while trying to dock, and upon noticing that, some nearby controllers tried to communicate with the ship to let them know that they were too close. However, the ship never responded to their calls, and that's not what's supposed to happen. Due to their lack of response, the ship hit the dock and knocked down not 1 but 2 cranes. And the worst part is that there were people who were actually trapped under the metal of the cranes after the incident and had to be rescued. Not to mention that some cargo containers were severely damaged in the event. So not listening caused an incredible amount of damage and almost cost some people their lives. Number 6. One apiece. Now we move away from cranes and human error to talk about a key danger that ships face while on the water: storms. Specifically, when a container ship finds itself caught in one. As any captain will tell you, the worst thing that could happen in a storm is that multiple cargo containers on board will shift around the ship, causing the ship to rock back and forth and potentially sink. In the case of the One Apus in 2021, they found themselves in a storm so bad that their cargo containers not only rocked, but fell off the ship. Over 1,800 containers fell into the water due to that storm, which was the worst cargo loss in years. And while the images you're seeing obviously don't highlight the event itself, they do show how bad things can go, and how even those containers that stayed on board weren't exactly intact. Number 5. Collision in the Welland Canal. Previously, when you've seen ships collide, it had to do with one ship already docked and the other moving around it. But on the Welland Canal, which connects Lake Ontario to Lake Erie, 2 ships were moving toward each other in a routine maneuver that ended up being anything but. The Alani ship was heading up the canal with a load of wind turbine parts, while the Florence Spirit was heading down with a load of coal. Because of the angle of the filming, you expect them to pass each other, but instead they basically collided head-on. That's not exactly how this kind of thing is supposed to work. Seriously, how did you not notice that they were basically playing a floating game of chicken? And notice how the ships basically stop in place right after the event occurred. That should show you the force that actually occurred there. Number 4. Crash on the Baltimore Bridge. Now, you may recall an event that took place in early 2024 where a ship hit a bridge in Baltimore, Maryland and caused some serious damage. That was the ship Dolly, and it was a serious event when it occurred as people actually died due to the damage to the bridge. So how on earth did this happen? There wasn't just one root cause, there were unfortunately several. The ship had been dealing with some severe power outages and blackouts, which included right before it hit the bridge. It was also being piloted by a rookie who was being supervised by an experienced pilot. No matter how you look at it, it was an absolute tragedy, and it's one that should never be replicated if possible. Number 3. Collision on the Rotterdam Bridge. Sadly, we don't have to look that far back to see another case of a large ship hitting a bridge. In 2020, a bridge in Rotterdam was hit by a container ship. While the bridge was generally fine, the ship itself lost a couple of containers. As for how this happened, it was apparently another case of ignoring low tide. Apparently, when the ship went to the bridge the first time, it was at low tide and everything was fine. But then when it came back, it didn't recognize that it wasn't low tide again and tried to go straight through. And you know how that always goes. It's not the first time a ship has become a victim of high tide, and it probably won't be the last. Number 2. Shaken and sunk. Throughout this video, I have shown you all kinds of boats that have been damaged or caused damage to various things. However, something I haven't shown you was the act of a boat sinking due to one of these mistakes. I'm going to change that for you now. In Greece, authorities were called late at night due to an emergency call from a superyacht, and I'm not joking here, it was called 007. Apparently, the captain wasn't paying the best attention to the terrain he was sailing through, taking that expensive yacht and running it aground, causing a lot of damage and allowing the boat to list and sink. Number 1. Head-on collision. Now, if you've ever wondered what it would be like to be on a boat that was about to be hit head-on by another boat, well, I've got a short and sweet video for you right here. You can clearly see that two boats are about to collide with each other, and the person taking the video is justifiably terrified of what's going to happen to him and the boat itself. This is another one of those horror movie moments because you know it's about to happen, and you're just waiting to see how bad things are going to go. A head-on collision is pretty bad, and they were clearly out at sea when it happened, so one can only imagine how this actually ended. Well, that's it from the realm of ship collisions against all sorts of weird and wild things, and why many of those who captain those vessels should never pilot one again. Can you believe all the collisions that occurred and which ones were the most shocking to you? Maybe there's another shocking ship blunder that should have been mentioned on this list. Go ahead and tell me all about it in the comments section below. Check out all the other cool stuff that's popping up on the screen, and I'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe for more fascinating content like this. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.